Okay.
So hi.
Hi, Heather. It's so nice to see you.
It is lovely to see you. I see a different piece of your house, I think, than the last time we spoke.
Yeah, this is where I see clients.
Oh, okay, nice. So we're in your office.
Yeah.
Um, just to start, would you like to say just your name, where you are?
Yeah, Elizabeth Revell, and I'm in York, Pennsylvania, in the United
Okay,
States.
wonderful. The first question that we have for you is perhaps people think it's like, oh, this is a bit different, but it's who are you as a person? What are some of your qualities, your interests, your passions?
Huh. Not one I was prepared for. Who am I as a person? Uh, Being a therapist is really central, focal, and has become more so over the years. Um, and being a Gestalt therapist, of course, is central to that. It sort of formed my worldview. Um, I'm a mother of a 33-year-old Congolese son. We have a little farm. We have farm animals, llamas, alpacas, and sheep. Um, and I think I keep coming back to connection in my mind. I guess some of the more professional questions I might have anticipated would have been around that. Why Gestalt? Because it's all about contact, about, and right now with our being under a stay-at-home order and not being able to see people except virtually, the elation I felt when I saw you on the screen, it was just, and that's how it's been, and seeing familiar clients, it's just, oh, it's so wonderful. And so I guess connection may be the most important thing in my life.
Yeah, yeah, I found you to be a very open and very contactful person.
Oh,
So,
thank you for saying that. Yeah.
one of the next questions that we have, you can take this in whatever realm of life you would like, but it's who would you say has had the most impact on you as a person?
Okay. Probably my late husband, Alvin, um, because through his support, I really was able to realize a lot of the dreams that I had and a lot of the things that I wanted to do. Plus, he exemplified so many qualities that were important to me. I learned so much from him too. In a way, he was a mentor before we fell in love and got married. um, and the person I want to mention next is Sonia Nevis. Alvin and I had the good fortune of being able to be in a supervision group with her for some years. And I can't overestimate what we learned from her and even how much it was possible to learn just by being around her. It was because of Sonia that I got to have a stint as co-editor of the Gestalt Review, and having her believe in me enough to make that possible was just amazing. And then she became kind of a supervisor, therapist, at the other end of the phone for a large part of my life. So I would name those two as the most influential.
Okay. And the next question is, what event or circumstance would you say has shaped who you are as a human being?
I want to mention now the adoption of my son, because I became a mother at 58. It's a little unusual. And for some reason, I found myself doing pro bono work in a group home for family groups and children who came here as unaccompanied minors, immigrants. And when I say for some reason I found myself, I remember that when I got called and asked if I would do that as a volunteer, that I had reached a point in my life where I wasn't volunteering anymore. And the word yes came out of my mouth, and I started looking to see, who said that. But, if you call it fate or whatever, shortly after being there, we met Micaiah. And shortly after we met him, his mother died in the Congo. His father had been killed a couple of years earlier. So that left him an orphan. And he was just a lovely soul. And Alvin and I fell in love with him and him with us. And he became our son. So at that moment, my life took a turn that I could have never imagined, and what it's been to be around, you've met him, he's quite remarkable, and he even created his own foundation, and, with my help. But when he said his ideas about it, I couldn't imagine that it would really happen. I was there encouraging him, but also thinking, yeah, that's not going to happen. But he now has an orphanage in his home country of Congo, DRC, with 4 children there. So meeting Micaiah really was so formative of my life as it is today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. A little bit more about you in the Gestalt area. I won't start with the obvious of how you got there. I would first like to ask what you're most attracted to in Gestalt.
So I'm going to answer that and at the same time answer the question you didn't ask. But when I was in graduate school, there was a really famous film called 3 Approaches to Psychotherapy. And the patient was a woman named Gloria, and she was interviewed by Carl Rogers, Albert Ellis, and Fritz Perls. And after I watched that film and saw what Fritz Perls did with her, I said, oh, that's therapy. And that was it.
Okay.
Yeah. And it had everything to do with his capacity to be present and to see, and then to enable her to see some things. And some people who watched that film, some fellow students, thought that he was a little hard, on her. And yet in her commentary at the end, she said, that's therapy. So that was really interesting.
And has your interest evolved into any specific area in Gestalt over the years?
Trauma, more than anything. One book that's been pretty important to me was Jim Kepner's book called Healing Tasks. And he talked about working with people who were sexually abused as children from a Gestalt framework. And he developed a model that I've found much more far-reaching than working simply with survivors of sexual abuse. And so I think his model is really important, and working with people who are traumatized, which many of us have been, is most.
I don't know anyone who isn't.
Yeah, that's well put. Yeah. So that's how I ended up doing the pro bono work at the house where we met Micaiah and all of that. So that's been a focal point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So everybody has stories and everybody has memories. Would you say that there's a particular memory that stands out for you related to Gestalt that would be like right now just your greatest Gestalt memory?
Wow. Um, Memory after memory from being in Sonia's supervision group. Um, I had studied also at the Pennsylvania Gestalt Center with Mariah Fenton Gladys, and she was extremely gifted at creating experiments. So a lot of that. But the one that keeps pushing into my head right now had to do with seeing Irv Polster do a presentation at a huge conference, and a participant asked him whether he loved his clients. And he stopped and he thought for a minute. And then he said, I think if you really know someone and you're not threatened by them, you love them. So that carried with it a whole lot of permission too, to, from my side, become attached and to love the people that I work with.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, you were going to say?
Oh,
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just that I have a similar sort of recollection of a moment when someone brings love into the therapy relationship for the first time with me, and it's like, oh, that's what that is. It was Ansel Wolt.
Was it?
And and it's a before and after. It's like, oh, that is loving presence. Now I get it, and it's named as love, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah,
yeah.
Well, the other side of that question is, what would be one of your more challenging moments, or one of the challenges that you faced in Gestalt?
I'm thinking of a woman who was my most challenging client. She had dissociative identity disorder, and she had a really bad history of abuse in the context of a cult that took place when she was really little. And when you think about multiple personalities, that's very consonant with Gestalt theory. And Irv Polster wrote a book called A Population of Selves. And we set up experiments in which we have parts of ourselves dialogue with one another. And I can't tell you how over my head I felt having this client. And yet here I had a model, for thinking of her. And I thought, well, let me just follow the model. And, working with my anxiety all the time, because she also had some self-injury stuff that went on. At the conclusion of her therapy, which was some years, I really felt good about the work I had done, and I felt good about how I had conceptualized it, because I had her do things like had a notebook and everybody was to write in the notebook. So, we set up the dialogue group, whatever, and
it was like group therapy with one person.
It was indeed, it was. And one of the things I always worried about was closing a session in a way that whoever was out could get in a car and drive, because many of her alters were children. And so I always scheduled her right before my lunch break. And so that way, when we were finished, she could rest and she could stay in the office, until she was ready to go. And one of the times, I don't remember what had happened, but I put an Afghan over her while she was lying on the sofa, and then I went to have my lunch. At the close of her therapy, again, after all my brilliant interventions, she said to me that what made the biggest difference for her in therapy was the day I covered her when she was lying on the sofa. And she knitted me an Afghan as a parting gift. So,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Amazing, this work, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the love and it's the relationship, much beyond the technique and the acceptance.
I think it boils down to that. I really do. And yet some of the situations that present themselves are scary, like this one. This was the most scary of all. Some of the stories were so horrific. And yet being able to sit with them, not leave the room, just stay, even with your own feelings, even with how overwhelmed you are, how scared you are, how horrified you are, but to stay and be with that person it's everything.
Mm-hmm. It is. Hmm. So this next question kind of makes sense. How has all of this Gestalt over the years affected you as a person?
um I think it's really helped my capacity to be present everywhere. you know I, it doesn't, when you asked the first question about describing myself as a person, and I alluded to being a therapist being really central, but maybe it's not that my being a therapist is something I take out into the world. Maybe instead it's my being Elizabeth in the world and walking as into the therapy room as Elizabeth. So it's all of the piece, that ability to be present. And it really is, I feel so fortunate to have been supported in that, and taught that, and taught how to enhance that.
Mm-hmm. So when you say that, I'm assuming that is by other people. And the next question is actually whether or how you feel part of a Gestalt community. What does that say to you?
I feel a little more distant from my Gestalt community than I was at earlier points in my life. My husband went through a protracted illness, and he died just under 2 years ago. And so during that time, I was more remote, and it re-entered within a few months of his death by going to the AHGT conference in Toronto, where I met you. And thanks to you, I've been drawn back in, a little bit at a time, but in, for sure, in it. The conference that you put together and sponsored, and you're supporting Mackay's and my being a part of it, it just was wonderful. And again, that's a community of people who knows about presence and connection. And so I just really feel fortunate to be back at this level, even at this level.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You've been doing this for a few years, so you've been through some different times in the world.
Yes.
And I'm curious if there's anything particular about your experience sort of in the field as a woman over the years that you would speak to.
Huh. Yeah. Oh boy. Where I went right away was that I think one of the reputations um, that Gestalt got, and maybe deservedly so, in the United States was one of being sexually exploitive of women. And some kind of key figures in Gestalt were kind of known for that. And being connected with Sonia and Ed Nevis really turned that around. And I mean, Sonia, a woman in the field, developed an approach to couples and family, and she was really key. I remember it being said at one time that, and Sonia and Ed were key figures in Cleveland Gestalt, and that's going to be important in a second. I remember it being said to me once that in terms of Gestalt, New York was the brains, California and Esalen was the genitals, and Cleveland was the heart. So I saw that shift in the Gestalt world as a whole, and then experienced it as a woman where that kind of sexual exploitation really diminished. I won't say it disappeared, but it certainly diminished and became less supported.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'd never heard the three parts of the elephant described that way, but it really does depend where you were, I guess, what you think an elephant looks like, right? So,
Right.
okay, yeah. Um, and I guess the last thing that we wanted to ask is a little bit about where you see all of this going in the future, either for yourself, like what do you want to do from now on, or where do you see this whole thing going? Where do you think Gestalt will be going?
I think, and you know, talking to you about this seems a little odd because you are the most instrumental person that I know in creating what I'm about to say, and that is Gestalt becoming owned by many more people, no longer held by people who had the means to get to a conference, for example. You know, so more minorities, more women, more people who are handicapped, more people who aren't in it for the money, you know. So I see Gestalt as a movement moving much more into the world where all of us live, not just a privileged few. You know,
Wow.
yeah. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for seeing me as part of that, but that is very much what I would love to see. That would be beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
And some people say, "Oh, take it away from the elders in the community," but it's not about that because something that you kind of touched on is that even the elders within the Gestalt community get pushed out when they're not able to travel to the conferences anymore.
Bluetooth cancelled.
That's
And
exactly right.
it's just it sort of speaks to the treatment of elders in general in a lot of our societies, and
That's right.
it's not even different within the Gestalt community. Um,
That's right. That's right. And this, that,
there are so many different communities on the fringes. It's
right.
yeah.
I think it has to go in that direction or it will cease to be. and it would be a terrible loss. You know?
Yes, yes, it would.
So, yes, and it needs.
I mean, it would be a loss to so many people who haven't even had a chance to try it yet.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mm. Wow.
Bluetooth connected.
Sorry, my speaker's confused and is cutting in and out. But
That's all right.
is there anything else that you would like to add to this at this point?
Mm. I I think how privileged, oh, I'm starting to choke up, how privileged I feel to have this work to do. You know, what a privilege it is that people come in and tell you what's in here very deeply and allow me to be a witness to the deepest parts of their lives. So that would be it, is how privileged I am to be in this field.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Well, thank you. I don't know if I have anything else to specifically ask you right now, but it's always lovely to speak with you, and I enjoy very much the depth that you bring to these meetings and these conversations.
Oh, thank you. That's nice of you to say.
Hmm. And I'll just sort of arch my eyebrows here. And maybe we put this in, maybe we don't, depending on whether you want to touch on it or not. It's kind of just occurs to me that, did you want to say anything? I mean, we've talked about age and sort of classes and gender, but did you want to touch on anything about race in the Gestalt community?
You know,
I mean, I met you in a persons of color group, and both of us are pretty white,
I
but
know, I know.
that's a
And
color and it's a theme.
it is. And I remember what I had said in that group, that you came over, and it had to do with when I walk into my home, I'm the only white person there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my husband Alvin had felt very keenly in a minority in some Gestalt events he attended, and then later developed some very deep friendships. You mentioned Ansel. He adored Ansel, and Ansel him, but that transcended that. But you know, Alvin, although he had humble beginnings, as did I, believe it or not, but he did end up with his PhD. He was, you know, he became among the privileged too. So that's why he could be there. And at most, at conferences we attended, there would be one other person of color in a group of 300, you know. So he would have loved to be here to see, you know, more and more people of color showing up and claiming it, you know, saying, this is mine too, you know, because that's how it happens, you know. So, you know, I hope that addresses what you're asking, what it gets at, whether it gets at what you ask.
Yeah, I mean, just the simple fact that you're saying that there was a before and an after.
Yeah.
It's something that's changing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm glad, just, yeah, to at least name it, because sometimes it's kind of ignored.
That's right.
And I mean, I speak to it from my not obvious part, being a Mexican citizen and with living in Mexico with Mexican colleagues. And I know that you speak to it from your own context.
That's right.
So
There, and this may be taking this too far afield, but because of our social distancing and our stay-at-home situation right now with COVID-19, one of the things that is breaking my heart is that the Navajo Nation is hit very hard, and they're really lacking in hospital and medical facilities. The group that is statistically hit the hardest is Latinos. Of those confirmed cases, I heard a statistic just yesterday, of those confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the US, 56% are African American. So this is the lived experience of people of color. And it's just heartbreaking, just to be with it.
it is, and it's so difficult to imagine. The attitude. I wanted to say the old attitude, but it's not the old attitude. It's still there,
Yeah.
of just work really hard, and you can get anywhere, and you can get up to these elite privileged training groups that meet in cabins in the woods for weeks on end. And I mean, so many people just can't even get basic health care and get basic ends met.
That's right.
How do you get? I don't even know, but I think
with the COVID-19 thing, that's a big piece behind the statistics. But another one of the big pieces is that in the US, such a high proportion of caregivers are people of color.
yes.
And so they're being exposed much more than the rest of us.
And even on the caregiving totem pole, it's not the same statistic in psychotherapy.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much more to say to that, but it's something that I do sit with a lot lately.
Yes.
Yeah. Just wanted to see what you had on that. So if that's okay with you, I appreciate your time, and I'm sorry for having left you waiting, but that wasn't me, it was Zoom.
I know. No worries.
All right, so I will say thank you for now, and I'll be in touch, okay?
It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Same. Say hi to Micaiah for me.
I will. Thanks, Heather. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.